Afternoon. Sorry. I'll call to order this meeting of the Housing Policy and Development Committee. I'm Chair of the committee, Cam Gordon. I'm joined today by Council Members Schrader, Ellison, and Goodman. I suspect the remaining committee members will be showing up soon, but I thought we could get started. There's 8 items on the agenda. 2 of them are public hearings having to do with land sales, and then there's a public hearing about a modification on a housing replacement tax increment financing plan. And then we have a few consent items, and then we have one discussion item at the end on the Unified Housing Policy amendments. I'm going to go ahead and move the consent agenda here that includes the following. The first is confirming mayoral reappointments to the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority for 3-year terms. The 5th item on the agenda, our second consent item, is a carry forward of year 2019 tax-exempt housing revenue bonds. The next item is a transfer of redevelopment contract with Blue Gold's Ventures to Great Lakes Property Group, and this is for the property at 756 Jackson Street Northeast. And the 7th item, our last consent item, is accepting a bid for property maintenance, mowing, and snow removal. Actually, it's more than one. Councilmember Goodman, did you want to pull anything off or comment?
I just wanted to comment on item number 7.
Go ahead.
I just note that item number 7 is a bid for property maintenance, mowing, and snow removal, which sounds like a really not important item, except for half of the contracts are going to Better Futures and the Tree Trust, which are 2 organizations that do incredible work on workforce development. These are organizations that are working towards helping youth and people of color, people coming out of incarceration, towards job security. And so that means that almost $1 million of these contracts are going to organizations that meet our workforce and living wage priorities. So peppered throughout our entire organization, we have the ability to make changes on racial equity just based on where contracts go. And I can just point to those 2 and the incredible work that they do. And I would guess that those are very big contracts for these organizations as well. So I want to thank staff for bringing that forward and just highlight the good work of Better Futures and the Minneapolis Tree Trust.
Well, thank you so much for bringing that up. Those are 2 great organizations. And particularly, I appreciate Better Futures, which is based in the 2nd Ward, but also that does a lot of reentry program, and it's been enormously successful. So with that, welcome Councilmember Reich, and we're ready to move the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries. Then we'll move ahead with our public hearings. The first is one land sale. This is 1337 Newton Avenue North. And Mr. Ramadan will be making a report. Welcome.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Gordon, members of the committee. My name is Matthew Ramadan, CPAD Senior Project Coordinator, and we have before us today one land sale for 1337 Newton Avenue North, the sale of which was approved through the Minneapolis Homes policies for the program were established by the City Council on December 11, 2015, and reconfirmed on February 10, 2017. Staff recommends the sale of 1337 Newton Avenue North to Vu Dang for its appraised value of $20,000, subject to conditions. Staff further recommends approval of the award of up to $20,000 homebuyer incentive funds to Vu Dang. 1337 Newton Avenue North was acquired on March 20, 2007 from the Northside Residents Redevelopment Council, also known as NERC, for $14,500. The staff has continuously marketed this property to a listserv of now over 2,800 people. This is the only application received through Minneapolis Homes, the Minneapolis Homes Build program. The purchaser intends to invest $340,000 to be the owner-occupant of a new 2,300 finished square foot, 4-bedroom, 3-bath home with a detached 2-car garage. CPAD's construction management staff has reviewed the plans and estimates submitted by the applicant and confirmed that they are sufficient to meet the new construction standards of the Minneapolis Homes program. And just a short aside, this is one of the houses that you see featured oftentimes in the Minneapolis Homes webpage. And so this is one that a model that we really like and the neighborhood really likes. Notification was provided to the Northside Residents Redevelopment Council on October 1st, 2019, and the NERC board supports this proposal. We have with us today Mr. Vu Dang and Christina, who are the home buyers, or the home, and also the builder, Mr. Dan O'Neill, are present today. Are there any questions for me?
I don't see any questions. Thank you so much for the report.
Okay.
This is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing on the land sale. If anybody wants to get up and speak and introduce yourself, that's fine, but it's not necessary, but we'd love to hear from you. You want to come up to the podium and just say hello and some of your hopes and dreams for the property?
Hello.
Hi, I'm Christina.
And I'm Vu. We're first-time homeowners, and we're excited to be able to live in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Maybe we can not only feature the home in our thing, but also the buyers, because I think that was wonderful. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on this issue? Seeing none, then I will close the public hearing. And Councilmember Ellison.
Just wanted to say thank you guys for coming, and I'm excited to have you, living in North Minneapolis, and congratulations. And I'm happy to move approval of this item.
Thank you very much. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries. And now we have our second item, and this is a whole package of land sales. This is probably the biggest action that we'll take about home ownership, and so I'm excited to learn more here and welcome Mr. Kanasi to make a presentation.
Thank you, Chair Gordon and members of the committee. As you said, my name is Kevin Canais, and I'm here today with action items for the Minneapolis Homes Development Assistance Program. The program itself provides funding for project gap and affordability gap for the development of 1 to 4 unit housing on city-owned vacant lots. An RFP for this round, which is round 4 of the program we often call MHDA for short, was conducted this fall, and a combination of both internal staff and stakeholders from Minnesota Housing, Twin Cities Land Bank, and LISC reviewed the applications from the developers based upon the council-approved criteria. And equity itself is the #1 scoring criteria that we looked at, and it's evaluated by looking at both the historical households that have been served by the developers that applied, as well as those that they're proposing to serve in the marketing or efforts that they're going to be taking to do so. We also look at previous experience successfully completing city-funded projects as part of the program, and financing that developers are able to bring to help fund the developments, as well as the designs that they're proposing. So looking at things like if they're proposing to do 5 or more bedrooms, since larger bedroom properties are in shortage in the city, as well as if they're incorporating additional green features. And then we're also looking at, or we looked at the impact within the communities where the developments are proposed. So looking at things like if there's a cluster development proposal that's proposed, or if there's like a neighborhood recommended plan that's incorporated. So the program itself has a number of goals, the first of which is preserving affordable homeownership opportunities throughout Minneapolis. So homes constructed through this program are actually the most affordable new construction homes within the city of Minneapolis. And in 2018, Council approved an increase in the affordability gap assistance to help us ensure or try to prioritize ensuring that homeowners that purchase the homes are at or below 80% of area median income. And then in addition to that, home buyers also have the opportunity to access other down payment assistance programs that they can layer with city funds. So kind of looking at that, that's usually up to about $15,000 in down payment assistance outside of city sources that home buyers have been able to access in the past. The second goal of the program is encouraging new housing development on city-owned vacant lots. So this is our second round of funding within 2019, the round 4 funding, and we're proposing to fund the development of 59 units of housing. So for 2019, that would be a total of 93 units that would be approved for funding through this program for this year, which is about 4 times what's typically done in a year. So it's really great to see the impact that that has. And then the third goal of the program is improving equitable outcomes in construction, contracting, and homeownership. So we had 11 developers that actually applied, and of those developers, 7 are Black, Indigenous, or people of color-owned businesses or run nonprofits. And then 2 of them are also women-led organizations as well. In addition to that, we also have 3 developers that are partnering with workforce development groups, and we also looked at how the developers' demographics of the households that they've served in the past are. And new this round, we looked at a passive housing pilot, so that was incorporated into this round of the RFP, which is a partnership with the Office of Sustainability, where they're providing up to $180,000. And as part of that process, we're undertaking a study with a consultant to look at how we can increase the development of passive homes or homes that are certified as Department of Energy, Zero Energy Ready within the city. And we're expecting that study to be completed here within the next couple of months, and we'll have some more information that will inform our program in the future. And then in terms of the program this round, we're looking at providing an additional funding incentive to developers that applied to build homes that meet one of those 2 standards. And we had 4 developers apply, and those developers are City of Lakes Community Land Trust, John Ash Construction, Paragon Grounds, and Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity. And they propose to do 13 homes that are either passive certified or DOE Zero Energy Ready certified. In addition to the passive housing study, we're also undertaking a long-term affordability study. So the goal of this is to increase the rate of LTA properties that are developed through the program. Right now, it's about 20% of the homes that are developed. As part of that process, which began this summer, we've conducted 4 community engagement sessions, market study, and then done an analysis of existing models, both our own model and then models nationally and even internationally that have been able to preserve long-term affordability through those models. We'll have draft recommendations here in early 2020 that will also inform our programming. Looking back at 2018, so we served 34 households with our development programs, and looking at that, about 3/4 of the households served are Black, Indigenous, or persons of color households. And then looking at our program income, the average income of households served, it's about $68,000 for a family of 4, which is also equivalent to 68% AMI. Our program does go up to 115% of area median income, but we've seen consistently through this program, as well as the predecessor, Green Homes North, that we've been kind of in that 60% range. So we've been successful at serving lower income households. So with that, I'm going to give you an overview of the proposed recommendations for sale and funding, and then I'll take some questions. So we had 11 developers that proposed to do 59 units. So the first developer, Mine Home Source, is proposing 7 single-family homes. City of Lakes Community Land Trust is proposing 2 long-term affordable homes, and Eastshore Masters is proposing 6 single-family homes. And you can see the designs on the presentation of some of their properties. And then we have Greater Metropolitan Housing Corporation that's proposing 10 single-family homes. Jenny Investments is proposing 2 single-family homes. And then John Ash is proposing to do 1 duplex and then 3 single-family homes. And then we've got Magnolia Homes with 1 duplex, Paragon Grounds with 1 single-family home, and PRG with 8 single-family homes. And then Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity is proposing to do 7 long-term affordable homes. And looking at that, so there's 59 units that are proposed through the program for funding and sale. 46 of those would be single-family homes, 5 would be duplexes, and 1 would be a triplex. And you may be, if you were keeping track, looking at me and saying, well, those numbers don't add up. And the reason for that is we also, as part of our RFP, did a second RFP for our Missing Middle pilot program, which funds the development of 3 to 20 unit housing developments within the city of Minneapolis. And 2 of the proposals received through that program actually meet the program qualifications of the Development Assistance Program as well. So we're proposing to have those be funded through Development Assistance to preserve funding for Missing Middle in order to develop more affordable units of housing. And those 2 proposals are 1 through Gimmick with a partnership with the City of Lakes Community Land Trust for 6 long-term affordable units and 3 separate duplexes on about 36 in Lindale. And then for 1 triplex through Green Affordable New Homes That would be like a pilot triplex that they'd be doing with us, and then if successful, we're also proposing that they have development rights on 4 other sites to build 4 more triplexes with 12 additional units. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
I have a question. You talked a little bit about the affordability of the homes and the history of that, and you also talked about recommendations coming up. It looked like most of those recommendations might have to do with sustainability, but I just wanted to clarify that you'll also be reviewing affordability levels with the possibility of us maybe focusing more on more affordable homes. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair Gordon. So we are doing the passive housing study, which is on sustainability, but the long-term affordability study is specifically focused on preserving the homeownership opportunities for lower AMI households, realizing that we're in a market where homes are becoming more expensive and it's becoming more challenging for those households to attain homeownership. So how can we ensure our programming continues to serve households kind of at that level that we've traditionally done, which is about that 60% AMI?
It also seems to me, based on my memory, that we've seen an increase in the diversity of the developers that are coming forward, and I know this has been a focus of ours, and we've even had this technical assistance for developers. Is that what you, does this seem like a pretty dramatic increase or a steady increase in Black, Indigenous, people of color, and women-owned companies that are coming forward?
Yes, Chair Gordon. So we've seen a steady increase in participation from developers of color in our program. Traditionally, most of the developers that participate that are new to our program are private developers and developers of color. So we have seen that increase over our program, and part of that has been through our programming. We have other opportunities as well. So when a developer becomes engaged, maybe not through just this program, but through another program, it kind of helps to get over the learning curve of working on a government-funded housing development program, and we've been able to work with developers and have them experience great success in building homes and serving households.
Fantastic. I don't see any other questions. Oh, yes, I do. Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you for the presentation. Just wanted to maybe highlight or clarify. So when it comes to the passive housing pilot and the long-term affordability, one of the projects, the City of Lakes project, is kind of doing both, right, on a single project. And just wanted to highlight that because I think that often we're told that more energy efficiency is going to cost more, but here we have a project that's sort of creating a little bit of a Venn diagram over those two goals, which I just wanted to highlight and say that's kind of, would love to see us encouraging that more often and pursuing that. So thank you all for the work. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Ellison.
Well, I don't see any other questions. Thank you so much for the report and all the work that went into this and the rest of the staff who helped you.
Thank you.
And we, because it's a land sale, we'll be having a public hearing on this, and I'd like to open the public hearing and see if there's anybody here who would like to speak on this. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon. Kathy Wetzel-Mastel from PRG. Just thought it might be helpful to share a few details on our history with this program and other predecessors to this program. So if awarded, I wanted you all to know that your investment in the PRG projects leverages over $300,000 in Minnesota Housing Awards. So that's a good thing, and wanted to share just some demographic information about who's purchased PRG developed homes over the past 10 years and who's built those homes. So over the past 10 years, about 110 projects, 74% have been purchased by households of color. I've got a further breakdown by immigrant households versus U.S. born households, and race and ethnicity if folks are interested in it. But on the contracting side, similar results there. We've awarded $15 million in construction contracts, in 14 contracts with general contractors, and 3 of those have gone to white male-owned companies. So good stuff there. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that and appreciate all your work. Is there anybody else here who would like to speak on this issue? Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon. My name is Kimberly Miller, and my colleague here,
Mike Atlas.
and we are Green Affordable Homes. And so we just wanted to take a moment and thank you so much for your consideration. We're both born and raised in Minneapolis. My mother bought a PPL house when I was 14 years old, and it changed my life and our lives. And so housing is incredibly important to me personally, and really for both of us. A couple of things we wanted to highlight about Green Affordable Homes. One is in terms of affordability, our pilot triplex would actually allow somebody who, well, let me just say a couple of things about the model. We did research. I started researching probably about 4 or 5 years ago on how to build this project in this company and how to really fulfill the most critical needs. So the reason it's a triplex is because the upstairs is a full 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom flat. And then the downstairs is 2 smaller visitability units, perfect for aging in place, only 1 step up, 2-bedroom, 1 bath, or hopefully no steps up. So being able to provide that kind of housing, the other thing we wanted to do is we wanted to make it fit very much with our current housing stock. And so they're designed to be very craftsman-esque, although the interiors are all wide open, living areas that folks want. The other thing I wanted to mention was that we are heavy on the green and efficiency, energy efficiency side. We're building with SIP panels, and we have a very exciting partnership with EPS, a Midwestern company, for that. And we're also sourcing as many different interior suppliers as we can, like Mercury Mosaics in North Minneapolis, Bicycle Glass, which gets recycled glass right outside, right from St. Paul, and turns it into some gorgeous lighting. I could talk interior design all day, but just wanted to stop there and just emphasize that we're tremendously excited about this program. A family who buys that triplex, if they lived upstairs and rented at our projected rents downstairs, they would actually be able to own this entire building and pay about $600 a month. So we're tremendously excited about the potential for this throughout the city.
That's wonderful. Did you say it was a triplex?
It is.
So you didn't tell us much about the third unit.
So it's
2
one
units
big
side by
flat
side downstairs?
and then 2 right. And I actually have some handouts if you want them. But
I guess you did mention that. Sorry.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on this? Seeing no one come forward, then I'll close the public hearing, and I will move this forward for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries. Then we'll move on to our third item, which is a smaller, rather technical item, and this is compared to that last one, right? And this is by Mr. Canese.
Yes, thank you. So I'm here today with a request for approval of modification number 3 of the Housing Replacement District number 1. I wanted to provide a little bit of background. So the Housing Replacement District, or HRD for short, is a tax increment financing district that's authorized by special legislation from the state legislature back in 1995. Its sole purpose is for the acquisition and preparation of parcels, specifically for the development of housing with a market value that doesn't exceed 150% of the market value of single-family housing within the city. The TIF districts include vacant land, vacant housing, or substandard housing, and the plans authorize the expenditure of that tax increment for acquisition, demolition, and site preparation in order to sell the parcels for the development of new or rehabilitated housing. There are 4 districts in the city of Minneapolis, and they were approved by City Council in 1996, 2003, 2009, and then most recently, just this year in 2019. The second, third, and fourth districts were established after the time limit for expanding the existing district were reached, and as the special legislation was amended to allow us to have a greater number of parcels. So an example would be during the Minneapolis 2011 tornado, there was an increase in parcels specifically for that. It's currently projected that the tax increment revenues through the duration of HRD 1, which is 2022, will exceed the plan that's currently in place for the TIF budget established by modification number 2. And so this modification, which is number 3, is amending that plan to update the projected revenues. It doesn't change anything in terms of the objectives or activities we're undertaking within the district. It just simply authorizes the city's use of the additional anticipated revenue, and otherwise that revenue would be returned to the county. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions about the Housing Replacement District modification number 3 of HRD 1.
I don't see any questions. Thanks for that good explanation.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And keeping an eye on funding so it's not going over to the county. Not that they don't they do good stuff too. Seeing no questions, then I'll move that forward for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That motion carries. And now we'll move on to our last item. And this is the inclusionary housing policy amendments. We'll have a presentation. I guess I just want to let my colleagues know that there's a couple things at the dais here for you. I know that there's at least 2 motions coming forward. One of them is passed out as a staff direction by Gordon and Fletcher. Another one I think is coming from the council president.
I emailed that one. I'll have copies in a minute.
Yes, and that's not necessarily critical. But to make things a little bit simpler, we also printed out a version of the policy as if these staff directions had taken effect. So this is what the amended policy has been drafted to indicate based on these passing, just so it's clearer for everybody. Now, welcome, Ms. Brennan. Take it away.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Andrea Brennan, Director of Housing Policy and Development in the Community Planning and Economic Development Department. The requested action before the Housing Policy and Development Committee today is approval of a permanent inclusionary zoning policy that will replace the interim inclusionary zoning policy that has been in effect since January 1 of 2019. This request includes 2 parts. One, adoption of an amended and restated unified housing policy to include inclusionary zoning requirements, and second, approval of amendments to the revenue loss offset policy. Tomorrow, the Zoning and Planning Committee will consider approval of the inclusionary zoning ordinance. The ordinance establishes that site plan approval of residential dwellings of 20 or more units will be conditioned upon compliance with the inclusionary zoning requirements of the unified housing policy. If both committees approve the respective requested actions, the full City Council will consider approval of the ordinance, the Unified Housing Policy, and Revenue Loss Offset Policy on December 13th. If approved by the full City Council, the inclusionary zoning ordinance and policy will become effective on January 1, 2020, along with Minneapolis 2040 and the recently approved ordinance authorizing residential units with up to 3 units on properties in lower density zoned districts. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on the proposed ordinance on November 18th. Shanna Sether, who is also here, Principal City Planner, presented an overview of the ordinance and also the policy recommendations at this Planning Commission meeting. Public testimony was taken at that meeting. We've also received many written comments which are attached to the staff report and included in our legislative information management system. Stephanie Reyes with Grounded Solutions Network has served as a consultant to the city in developing the policy recommendations. She presented preliminary policy recommendations in October and is back today to present final recommendations. Before I ask Stephanie to to come up, I want to acknowledge the interdepartmental staff team that has worked with Grounded Solutions Network to develop this policy over the last 2 years. So Eric Nielsen and Shelley Rowe in the City Attorney's Office, Shanna Souther and Jason Wittenberg in CPED's Development Services Division, Matthew Hendricks and Mark Winkelhake in Finance and Property Services Development Finance Division, Emily Carr, Roxanne Young-Kimball, Angie Skildum, and Katie Topinka in CPED's Housing Division, Joe Bernard in CPED's Long Range Planning Division, Carly Weinman in Councilmember Schrader's office, and Deanna Pennington in Council President Bender's office. Many of us are in the room today and will be available to respond to questions after Stephanie's presentation. Finally, I want to acknowledge that over the course of the last 3 years, we have engaged many from the development and advocacy communities. Many stakeholders have contributed many hours to inform this policy, and staff believe that we are recommending a better policy because of their involvement and are grateful for it. So if it pleases the chair, I'd like to invite Stephanie Reyes with Grounded Solutions up to present our inclusionary zoning policy recommendations.
Welcome. It's nice to have you back.
Thank you. It's nice to be back, Chair Gordon and committee members. When I was last in front of you in October, I had a very long presentation that included both our draft policy recommendations for inclusionary housing as well as a long description of the rationale behind those policy recommendations. And in the interest of time today, I am simply going to review the recommendations themselves and not belabor the rationale. However, should anyone have questions about the reasons behind our recommendations, feel free to ask. So let's dive in. So Grounded Solutions is recommending providing developers with 3 options for how to comply with inclusionary zoning for rental projects. Providing 8% of units affordable to households making 60% of area median income with no access to city financial assistance. Providing 4% of units affordable at 30% of area median income. Or providing 20% of units affordable at 50% of AMI with access to city financial assistance. You may recall the council adopted a revenue loss offset policy last spring to cover use of tax increment financing, and we're recommending one addition to that policy, which is that if the city determines that the maximum available TIF is insufficient for the project to be financially feasible, the city will either offer additional financial assistance or reduce the inclusionary zoning requirement for the non-assisted option to a feasible level. For sale projects, we are recommending a phase-in of the inclusionary zoning requirement. So we would start with ownership projects currently being exempt from the inclusionary zoning requirements. But once we see 500 condo projects permitted, there'll be a quick 6-month wait period and then an initial requirement of 4% of units affordable at 80% of AMI. And then once the milestone of 1,000 condo units permitted has been hit and another 6-month phase-in period, the full condo requirement of 8% of units at 80% of AMI would be in effect. We're recommending several provisions around applicability of the policy. We recommend the inclusionary zoning policy apply to all projects of 20 units or more. That projects between 20 and 49 units have a temporary exemption until 500 units of that size have received their permits, and then a 6-month phase-in period. For projects from 20 to 99 units, we're recommending a scaled requirement to address the different financial feasibility of such projects. Projects from 20 to 85 units would have the first 15 market rate units exempt from the inclusionary zoning requirement, and that exemption would slowly taper off from 85 to 100 units. And then projects of 100 units or more will be subject to the full inclusionary zoning requirement. With respect to student housing, we are recommending that housing owned and operated by or on behalf of a college or university be exempt from the inclusionary zoning policy. but that privately built housing primarily intended for students be subject to the policy, and that students would be eligible for an inclusionary zoning unit if they meet federal eligibility requirements for affordable housing. And I understand we'll see some proposed staff directions on this topic in a moment. Next, I want to cover compliance alternatives. Grounded Solutions is recommending 3 alternative compliance options for developers in addition to on-site compliance. The first is an in-lieu fee. We're recommending the in-lieu fee be set to be moderately higher than the affordability gap, which is the difference between market rate rents and affordable rents for a project. That means that it would be moderately higher than the cost to build on-site. Specifically, the on-site requirement requires 8% of units to be made affordable. We're recommending basing the in-lieu fee on making 10% of units affordable, the equivalent of that, which calculates out to an in-lieu fee of $15 per square foot of market rate development for projects of up to 7 stories. Projects higher than 7 stories have slightly different economics and a different affordability gap. So for those projects, the in-lieu fee would come to $22 per square foot of market rate development. For an in-lieu fee for condo projects, we're recommending that be set to the same as the rental in-lieu fee and that it proportionally phase in as the requirement is phasing in. And the city should consider adjusting the condo in-lieu fee once the condo market picks up again. We're also recommending that off-site compliance be an option available. And the provisions here would start kicking in June 1st of 2020. Off-site compliance would be allowed within a half mile of the market rate development project. Developers could partner with an affordable housing developer for those off-site units. This is something new that we did not bring to you in October. We're now recommending that preservation and rehabilitation of existing unregulated affordable housing, also known as naturally occurring affordable housing or NOAA, be an allowed type of off-site compliance. And then for both new construction and preservation deals that are done off-site, at least the same level of public benefit must be provided as on-site. So that means things like serving the same or deeper levels of affordability for those units, the same or longer terms of affordability for those units, and then at least the same number of units. And it's likely that commensurate public benefit for a preservation project might actually mean more units are preserved than would have been built through new construction. Similarly, for both new construction and preservation deals, the market rate developer must make a meaningful contribution to the affordable housing project beyond what would already be bought to an affordable housing project through sort of the traditional affordable housing finance like tax credits. Affordable units should be built and ready for occupancy concurrently with or prior to market rate units, or the developer can provide a guarantee of the amount of the in-lieu fee that they would have had to pay. And finally, because these off-site deals tend to be fairly unique in their composure, we're recommending that any off-site compliance go to the council for your approval. The final compliance alternative we're recommending is the opportunity to donate land. This also would begin starting June 1st of next year. And donated land must have an appraised value greater than or equal to what the developer would have had to pay as an in-lieu fee. If the appraised value is less, the developer can make up the difference in a cash fee. Also, that land be located in an area with a high need for sites for affordable housing. And the land be developable for affordable housing, for example, zoned as residential. We have a very small number of recommended exemptions to the policy. One I already mentioned, housing owned and operated by or on behalf of a college or university. Also, affordable housing projects that use certain financing sources and provide at least 20% of units affordable at 60% AMI. And finally, that the council shall have the authority to grant exemptions under extraordinary circumstances where there is sufficient public benefit. Last couple slides, you've seen this one before. This is about effective dates and updates. Andrea mentioned the policy taking effect January 1st. At that point, the in-lieu fee compliance option will be available. In June, the other compliance alternatives would also be available. We recommend doing an annual update to the in lieu fee based on the construction cost index to make sure that the cost of paying the fee keeps up with the cost of building units on site. Staff has committed to doing an analysis of the policy and bringing you back an initial review of its progress within 18 months of adoption to see if there are any policy tweaks that might want to be made at that point. And then we recommend comprehensive reviews roughly every 3 to 5 years following that. Now, you may be very excited and feeling like, hey, here we are, it's December, we're going to be done. And the good news is that for all of you, that is indeed the case, that by the end of this month, you will be done with inclusionary zoning. Congratulations. However, one thing that Grounded Solutions has found through our many years of working with our 200+ member organizations that run long-term affordable housing programs, including inclusionary housing programs, is that really nailing down all the implementation details is absolutely critical for success. So Grounded Solutions will be working with staff over the coming weeks on a few different pieces. We'll be working on implementation details for development procedures. So these are things like exactly what information do developers need to provide about their IZ compliance? What forms do they need to fill out? When do they submit them and to whom? When exactly is the in lieu fee paid? Things like that. And also implementation details for selling and renting of IZ units. So for example, if you're setting an affordable price for a condo that serves an 80% AMI household, how do you consider things like property taxes or HOA dues when you set that affordable price? What are the marketing requirements for IZ units to ensure that we have equitable access and fair housing outcomes? How will those units be monitored and kept track of over time, et cetera? And the last point I want to make is that it does take staff time to implement an inclusionary zoning policy. That includes both staff who are working with developers during the development phase to make sure they understand the requirements and are proceeding accordingly, and also staff for monitoring units over time and any other role that the city might have in terms of applicant selection, income verification, et cetera. And interestingly, staffing needs for inclusionary zoning tend to increase over time as the portfolio of units that you have grows. And with that, I will take any questions you have.
Thank you very much. I think there may be some questions. Councilmember Ellison.
I just wanted to clarify. You provided an example of developers being able to pair compliance alternatives, and so I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding that correctly. So they could do both the fee and a land donation, for example.
Correct. That was the example that I used that I think would be the most common one if they have a piece of land that's
cool. Thank you.
So they could also build fewer than the 8% and then pay a fee in lieu partially?
We're not recommending that mix at this time.
Just wanted to clarify that, just because.
Yeah, exactly.
Appreciate that. I don't see other questions at this time. So thank you very much. So I think it's ours to deal with now, committee members. And I don't know if maybe we could. Did you want to go first?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be happy to move this unified housing policy, which is in front of us, which actually incorporates both of the amendments with the redlined version that is in front of us. So just to walk through that, that means on page 3, there's some language about eligible student housing, including the bedroom issue that's in the staff direction that maybe you or Councilmember Fletcher would like to describe. There's a note about the 60% of maximum rent for efficiency units at 60% EMI, also related to student housing. And it also incorporates what I would consider our kind of interim approach to no net loss policy on, I think, like the 6th page of our packet in front of us. So I'd be happy to move this amended version, and then we could talk about the policy as a whole, maybe highlighting those particular things that are reflected in the 2 amendments.
Excellent. So we'll consider that motion going forward then, and we'll just assume that the staff directions that you also have in front of you are part of that motion to clarify it for the clerk and everybody else. And I'd be happy to, did you want to speak on more of it right now? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been working on this policy for a number of years, dating back to last term, and really want to thank Councilmember Schrader for jumping in and his leadership and helping us get to this point where we're ready to vote on a policy. And I want to thank staff and our consultants for just all of the careful and thoughtful work that came into developing what I think is a really balanced plan, a good start for our city. I'm a council member who probably would have liked to see it, require more units and push a little farther. But I think we worked very hard to balance a policy that would not negatively impact the number of housing units that we're seeing built in our city, because that would, in the long run, mean fewer affordable units as well. Because inclusionary zoning, as its purpose, is leveraging private development to help us build affordable housing units. And I think if we look back, we would see that if we had had this kind of policy in place, there would be places of the city where we would have hundreds or even thousands of affordable units integrated into rapidly growing neighborhoods. And I know in the part of town that I represent, places like the Midtown Greenway developed pretty quickly all at once. Those are all market rate projects with a couple of exceptions of 100% affordable housing, that was supported by government entities and affordable housing developers. And having that integration of some affordable units into those buildings would have really benefited my community. So I think going forward, this is an opportunity for us to use one tool to help get some of that integration. I think as we track this policy over time, and see how it's working, I'm interested in continuing to emphasize that on-site building of units. We designed the policy so that it does allow a developer to pay an in lieu fee, but the fee is set pretty high so that it will still encourage those units to come on site. We will likely still see developers paying a fee that we can then use to build affordable housing elsewhere. But I do think this committee and myself have voiced priority for really over time emphasizing and prioritizing that in-site integrated development. But we know that that's a challenge. So I think this policy, again, is a good start that balances those needs of both continuing to see more market rate housing in a growing city, integrating affordable housing into new developments, and when that becomes financially difficult, allowing for a lot of other options to satisfy the policy's goals. I just want to briefly talk about this no net loss amendment. So we talked about this during the last presentation, and a no net loss policy that would go farther might say that when a new development is proposed, it would need to incorporate the levels of affordability and the kinds of affordability that might be in existing buildings there today. And this policy, as it's proposed today, is a start at that. So this says that a building over 100 units that would tear down older homes that are more than 50 years old, which are more likely to be affordable, that new project would have to at least replace the number of units that are there today. So in a 100-unit building, instead of being required to build the 8 units that would be required under the inclusionary zoning policy without this, if there were 12 units there being torn down, older affordable units, the new building would have to have 12 units. They may not be the same size, the same number of bedrooms. All of those details could be incorporated into a future, more robust no net loss policy. But at least for now, these larger projects that might be tearing down older affordable homes would have to incorporate more affordability in it than is required by the 8%. So happy to answer any questions about that. And again, just want to thank everyone for all of the careful work, my colleagues and staff, my own staff in my office who put so much time and effort into this. Actually, I've had 3 different aides work on this inclusionary zoning policy over the years, so I appreciate all of them. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Schrader.
I just want to echo the Council President's words of thanks, and also just about the importance of this ordinance. Like, first of all, this is extremely well thought out, and I just want to thank staff and all the stakeholders that put in so much time. I agree with the Council President. It's a great start, and I'm really curious and looking forward to seeing how this develops over time, to see how we adjust to the market. I also feel I would have loved to see it apply for more units. I'd love to see it go for more affordability, but we want to make sure that we continue to have the healthy market that we have. And I think there's a lot of council members that would want this to go a lot further. There's a lot of our constituents that have really been asking for that. But this is a great first step to really change, how we value housing in this city. But finally, I just also want to thank the council president. I think we've been working for this for so long that we lose how important this moment is, that this is the time that we're passing an inclusionary zoning, that when something new is going to be built in this city, we value affordability so much that it is going to be included. So thank you, and thanks to my colleagues.
Thank you very much. Also note that we've been joined by Councilmember Fletcher. Nice to have you here. Did you want to say something? Yes, please. Go ahead.
Thanks for letting me join you. So I wanted to first really echo Councilmember Schrader's thoughts and just really thank Council President Bender for your leadership on this. I think this is something that I've been hearing about from you since before I was even on the council. And I know it's been a priority for a long, long time. So to see us get to this point where we have a policy and we have something we've agreed on and that we can move forward with it is a big, big accomplishment. And I know it was a lot of work by a lot of people, but that your office really did a lot to keep everybody focused on it. So I want to appreciate your leadership on that. The staff direction that Chair Gordon and I are offering is to address one gap that we saw in the policy, and I'm appreciative of everybody working with us on this and appreciative of staff working with us on this. Andrea Brennan in particular did a lot of work to get us to where we are. And it just solves the problem that for most affordable housing, the way affordable housing is defined, students are excluded from it. And so we are leveraging their participation in the housing economy. They pay market rate rents, and so we're leveraging the private development that's trying to get their market rate rents to build affordable housing that we then disqualify them from, and that didn't feel fair, and it felt like we wanted to solve that in a way that could create some affordable units for students who are struggling. And so what we've managed to do is to create a way for, in a confined geographic area, to allow students to be eligible based on Pell Grant eligibility, so that we can provide a way to comply for student housing developers. And we've figured out it's not totally perfect because student housing is complicated, and we tried to really dig into this. But I think to at least be able to break this down to leases by room, because a lot of times we're not leasing a whole unit. Students, lease a room in a 4-bedroom apartment or something, and those arrangements work a little differently. And so we wanted to figure out a way to accommodate that, and we get that done. The reason that this got the focus that it got from my office and from Councilmember Gordon's office is because of the activism of students. And so I really want to appreciate everybody who showed up to testify. They were the most prominent voices at the public hearing on this ordinance. They have been consistently showing up at conversations about housing that's being proposed to be built in the University District. They have been consistently showing up and really making the case for affordability that is available to students. And you got our attention, and this is a success and a victory really for all of you that really initiated with the students who are going to be impacted by this policy. So I want to appreciate the time that you put into advocating for this, particularly MSA and everybody who's shown up around this issue. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate all the comments that everybody made and agree with them. I want to echo them. I do think the policy is rather complicated. I think it's maybe more cumbersome than I would have wished, and maybe there's a little more exemptions and alternatives than would have been ideal. But I understand that we are trying to balance a lot of needs and a lot of wishes out there. I'm a little bit concerned that we might be bending too far over to the market, but I also recognize that I'm not an expert in it, and so didn't really want to tinker with a lot of things. I really appreciate the two tinkerings that we've done as a committee. I think the no-let-loss idea is critically important, and I think it's even something that the developers will be able to relate to and will really make sense. I also really appreciate our ability to create this option for full-time students to have more eligibility. I think that the federal requirements are very onerous, and it would keep many very poor people out of taking advantage of this opportunity. Unfortunately, we can't necessarily change all those guidelines for those properties that are getting assistance because of other laws that get in the way with that federal assistance, but the ones that are created in the market without that kind of assistance are open to this. So I think it's great that we were able to open up this student eligibility. I want to do it citywide. I still would like to. I think if we pretend students only live in the university district, we're just fooling ourselves because they're going to be seeking housing everywhere. But I also understand that people were nervous about the impacts and the competition that might be coming up with affordable units throughout the city. So I'm really appreciative and hopeful that we'll have a unanimous support for doing it in the university district overlay area now. And also in the staff direction, you'll notice it's asking us to come back and or I want us to come back and study it later as part of our follow-up 3-year study. So we can look at that, and maybe even after 1 year we'll look at it and we'll understand it will have not much impact, and maybe we could open it up more. Because students I talk to don't all live within the university district overlay who could utilize this. I do also want to thank the Minnesota Student Association and people who got involved in this. Councilmember Fletcher and I participated in many discussions with people. I also attended a town hall that you convened on this topic so we could understand more about it. And they also rallied university staff and faculty to come forward and help. And it wasn't just the organizing, although that was really key, and it was powerful when there was enough outreach to the neighborhood organizations around the university to say, of course we support this and we want to have this happen there too. That was very powerful, but also the data and the information that we got, and we could look at it. And I hope that committee members had an opportunity to read some of the letters and some of the information there, and the fact that just this small change that we're doing, it's estimated that an additional 6,000 undergrads could then potentially benefit from this. It would increase it from the estimate was only 3% of all the students would be eligible without this change, but now this will increase that up to over 12%. So I think that could offer some significant opportunities and make a difference in people's lives. I also think the whole idea of how did the bedroom situation work and renting by the room and all of that was very complicated. And I have to tell you that representing the area around the university, I've seen again and again how landlords will play that so that they can profit from it in greater and greater ways. And hopefully this will actually be putting some limits on that and actually make it more affordable when somebody's sharing a bedroom than it would be otherwise, and other things like that. So, because the landlord often sees the sharing a bedroom as an opportunity to double the rent. And now we're going to be saying that's not going to count to do it that way. So this is significant. I don't want to talk too much about that little detail in the minutia that I've been living in to try to figure this out, but I just at least wanted to explain it and talk about it a little bit. But this is great first step, and we'll see how it goes. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to really underscore the thanks to the students who've organized and the organizations who have supported students in organizing, and you, Mr. Chair, and Councilmember Fletcher for bringing forward a proposal to really strengthen this ordinance to ensure that students are well served. I think there were a lot of creative ideas that came forward about how we could improve this ordinance potentially in the future, not just for students, but for everyone, looking at how we define affordability and really stretching ourselves to imagine making policies like this one, even more effective for low-income people, including students. So I'm excited to keep, kind of growing in how we look at that issue. I also wanted to really underscore that I don't think we would be here passing this ordinance, hopefully today, without the work of the Homes for All Coalition and their member organizations, including the Housing Justice Center, who have helped us, push for this change, who have helped take a very technical and complicated zoning issue and housing policy issue and talk with people in our communities about it, helping build public support, making sure that we heard about it, sometimes even before folks were in elected office. I don't think it's common for candidates to run on inclusionary zoning or necessarily get questions about it in candidate forums, and you made sure that we did, and I know that you'll make sure to continue to watch this policy and keep us accountable to tracking it and improving it in the future. So thank you for all of that work. Again, I don't think we would be here without it.
Thank you very much. I agree. I also just want to note and emphasize the date this goes into effect, January 1, and it was noted earlier. Also, that's when our new comprehensive plan will take effect, and that's when our new regulations having to do with duplexes and triplexes being allowed throughout the city. So this is a very significant step, and I think it's something that we've envisioned as a package that would have to work together. And the package isn't complete necessarily with just those three things, but this is a significant step. So seeing no other comments, then I'll call the vote on Council President's motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. That passes then. And thank you, everybody, for another great year on our committee. And we'll see you next year in this form, but we'll see you later tonight for our public hearing, and this meeting is adjourned. Thinking. Break or anything? Or?